Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome to today's explainer. Today we're diving deep into Surah Saba, which is this incredibly profound chapter of the Quran. We're going to move way past just reading the text to truly unpack its vivid imagery, some epic historical parables, and those core existential questions it basically forces us to ask ourselves. So let's dive right in. Let's kick things off with this incredibly striking visual from the text. Not even the weight of an atom in the heavens or the earth escapes him, nor is there anything smaller or larger than that except that it is in a clear record. I mean, think about that for a second. This immediately sets up the overarching theme for the entire chapter, the absolute, inescapable omniscience of the divine. Before we hear a single story about kings or ancient nations, we're grounded in this massive cosmic reality.
All right, moving into section 1, God's absolute power and divine omniscience.
The text paints a picture of a universe that's constantly in motion, right? Just imagine the sheer scale of awareness being described. God knows literally everything that penetrates the earth. Think seeds being planted, rainfall, buried treasures, and everything that emerges back out of it. Everything coming down from the sky and everything going up into it. It's this total panoptic view of reality. And this absolute knowledge, it connects directly to ultimate accountability. Because literally nothing is hidden, not even the weight of an atom. Ultimate justice, for both those who believe and those who deny, is absolutely guaranteed.
That brings us to section 2, Gratitude's model, focusing on David and Solomon.
Having established that divine baseline, we shift gears into our first major historical parable. And honestly, the visual metaphors here are just wild. Imagine the actual mountains and birds being commanded to echo a king's praise. Iron miraculously softens right in David's hands so he can forge these wide coats of armor. Then, for his son Solomon, the blessings scale up to basically commanding the elements and the supernatural. He controls the wind, covering a whole month's journey in a single day. He's got a flowing spring of liquid copper. And he literally has jinn, supernatural beings, doing heavy labor for him. They're building towering sanctuaries, massive statues, and cauldrons as big as reservoirs. It is a picture of completely unmatched, awe-inspiring earthly dominance.
But here's the absolute kicker, the central thesis of their entire story. With all that power, they were given this explicit command, "Work, O family of David, in gratitude." This brilliantly reframes what thankfulness actually is. Notice how it doesn't say feel gratitude or just speak it. It says work. Their immense, almost sci-fi level wealth was directly tied to their active, continuous, working gratitude toward the divine.
Then, the text throws in this fascinating, highly cinematic twist to remind us of basic human mortality. Solomon actually passes away, but he dies while standing up, entirely propped up by his wooden staff. The jinn are so terrified of him that they just keep doing their heavy labor, completely oblivious to the fact that their master is dead. And it wasn't an earthquake or an invading army that revealed his death. It was a termite, a tiny little creature of the earth, slowly eats away at his staff until it snaps. Solomon falls, the illusion is completely shattered, and it proves once and for all that the jinn do not possess knowledge of the unseen. It's a powerful reminder that all earthly and supernatural power is ultimately finite.
So this sets up a really stark contrast. On side A, you've got David and Solomon, handed unimaginable power, commanded to work in gratitude, and they remain completely faithful. On side B, we meet the people of Saba. Their command was so much simpler, just eat from the provisions of your Lord and be grateful. But they took things in a very different direction.
Let's get into section 3, Saba and ingratitude in their tragic fall.
If we look closer at the story that actually gives this chapter its name, the text describes what sounds like a literal utopia. The kingdom of Saba was blessed with 2 magnificent, lush gardens flanking them on the right and the left. They lived in a good land with a forgiving Lord, and their infrastructure was incredible. They had safe, measured travel between these blessed, easily visible cities. You could travel day or night in complete security, just surrounded by overwhelming abundance. All they had to do was acknowledge the source of all this bounty.
But they turned away. In their arrogance, they actually complained that their travel was too easy and literally asked for their journeys to be made harder and longer. The text describes their resulting fall with this devastating ecological precision. They were struck by the flood of Arim, the flood of the dam. Their lush paradise was totally swept away and replaced with gardens that only grew bitter, bad-tasting fruit, tamarisks, and a few sparse lote trees. This wasn't just random bad luck, you know? It was the direct, proportional ecological consequence of their absolute ingratitude.
That takes us to Section 4, the truth of wealth and material blessings.
Here we hit a really fascinating thematic pivot. The text shifts from ancient historical parables to address a totally timeless human misconception. It directly challenges the affluent leaders who are opposing the prophet. They essentially made the argument, well, we have more wealth and more children, therefore we are clearly favored and we won't be punished. It's that classic human assumption where we equate material abundance with divine approval. So let me pose the exact question the text asks. Do wealth and children actually bring you closer to the divine?
Well, the text gives a pretty definitive answer. No. Your wealth and your kids are not what elevates your rank. The only exception is for those who believe and do righteous deeds. For them, their material blessings are multiplied in reward and they reside securely in elevated mansions. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that material abundance is a test, not a guaranteed sign of favor. It's about what you actually do with what you're given.
Moving into Section 5, Day of Judgment Scenes and Total Accountability.
Because at the end of the day, everyone has to face the music. The text shifts into its end times themes, and we get these incredibly vivid courtroom-style scenes. It maps out this bitter blame game that's going to happen between earthly followers, the socially weak, and their arrogant, corrupt leaders. The followers point fingers, crying, "If it wasn't for you, we would have been believers. It was your night and day plotting." But the leaders coldly fire right back. "Did we physically stop you from following the guidance? No, you yourselves were criminals." Once the illusion of worldly power drops, everyone tries to pass the buck, but ultimately both parties are just struck with this silent, overwhelming regret.
And the punishment is described using this really heavy, visceral imagery. Iron collars will be placed around the necks of those who disbelieved. It's such a striking symbol of ultimate restriction and inescapable justice. After a life of freely choosing to turn away, of indulging in unchecked arrogance just like the people of Saba, this is the ultimate equalizer. They're completely bound by the very choices they made.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 6, an invitation to reflect and a very personal appeal.
As we near the end of the chapter, the whole vibe shifts from these massive cosmic scenes to something deeply personal. The text lays out its closing arguments with crystal clarity. First, it insists the prophet is strictly a clear warner, not a madman, not a magician out for their money. Then, it confidently states that truth will inevitably triumph and completely wipe out falsehood. But it comes with a really stark warning. When the sudden final panic hits, there will be no escape. People might try to claim they believe from a far-off place, meaning when it's entirely too late, but it just won't be accepted. And a permanent, uncrossable barrier will be placed between the deniers and everything they so deeply desire.
But right before that final barrier falls, the text leaves us with this incredibly intimate, powerful verse. Say, I only advise you of one thing, that you stand for God, in pairs or individually, and then reflect. I absolutely love this part. It completely strips away the whole mob mentality thing. It's basically asking you to step away from the noise of the crowd, stand with just one trusted friend or completely alone, and just think. Contemplate the messages, the history, the undeniable reality of a designed universe. It's this quiet, profound plea for sincere, personal reflection.
And that brings us to the end of our analysis. We've journeyed through the sheer scale of divine omniscience, the awe-inspiring, active gratitude of David and Solomon, the tragic, catastrophic fall of Saba, and the inescapable reality of ultimate justice. So I'm going to leave you with this. What will you take away from these ancient lessons on gratitude and accountability? How does this text challenge your own perceptions of wealth, power, and thankfulness? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope this structured dive into the text has sparked your curiosity to go and explore these profound themes even more deeply on your own.